Ethan hadn't left the hospital in 3 days. Coffee cups gathered like ghosts on the bedside table, and the stale smell of disinfectant clung to his clothes. Every morning he repeated the same ritual: wipe her face with a warm cloth, adjust her blanket, whisper, "Good morning, Grace." The nurses admired his devotion, but pity always hid in their eyes. They'd seen hope rot before. When he finally stepped outside for air, the sky hung low and grey. The hospital chapel's candles flickered through stained glass, each flame a trembling prayer. Ethan lit one too, his 12th this week, watching wax spill like tears down its side. "Sir, spare some change." The voice was soft, almost swallowed by the rain. A girl, maybe 14, sat near the chapel steps. Her clothes were torn, soaked through. A tangle of dark hair framed a face that didn't belong to the streets. Eyes too calm, too knowing. Ethan handed her a few bills, distracted. "Get something to eat," he said gently. She stared at him, then past him, to the hospital windows glowing across the parking lot. "Someone you love in there?" He nodded, throat tight. "My daughter. She's asleep. Won't wake up." The girl tilted her head, like listening to something only she could hear. "She's not gone," she murmured. "Just caught somewhere she can't find her way out of." Her words jolted him. "What do you mean?" The girl shrugged, eyes still distant. "Sometimes souls wander. I've seen it." Ethan sighed. Another strange encounter. Grief made him polite to madness. Still, something about her voice, steady, certain, made him pause. "Do you have family?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Not anymore. People stopped seeing me a long time ago." He wanted to say something kind, but she rose suddenly, rain dripping from her sleeves. "Don't lose faith, mister," she said softly. "Miracles like places they can't be bought." Before he could reply, she disappeared into the parking lot shadows. That night, as Ethan sat beside Grace again, her monitor flickered. For a split second, the green line stuttered, then steadied. His heart leaped. Coincidence, the nurse said. Machines glitch all the time. But he couldn't shake the image of that girl's calm gaze, the way she'd spoken about wandering souls. The next morning, Ethan found himself looking for her. He checked near the chapel, the cafeteria, even asked a security guard. No one had seen a homeless girl. Not today, not ever. By evening, exhaustion returned. He leaned against Grace's bed, whispering through a cracked voice, "Please? I'd give anything. Just open your eyes." Outside, thunder rolled, and for a heartbeat the lights flickered again. He pressed her hand tighter. Then, faint as a sigh, someone spoke from behind him. "I told you not to lose faith." Ethan spun around. There she was, standing in the doorway, hair still damp from the rain, eyes glowing with quiet certainty. He whispered, stunned, "How did you get in here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer to the bed, fingers hovering above Grace's chest like she was listening again, to something beneath the machines. "She's calling," the girl said softly. "She just doesn't know the way back." Ethan's voice trembled. "What are you saying?" "I can help her find it," she whispered. "If you'll let me." The room seemed to still, machines, air, even time itself. He stared, torn between desperation and disbelief. "You can wake her?" The girl nodded once, solemn. "If you truly believe it's her time to return." And before Ethan could form another word, she reached for his daughter's hand. "If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, would you stop her or let hope take over? Comment your answer below, and if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters." Ethan froze as the girl's small hand hovered above his daughter's. The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Her fingers trembled, then settled gently over Grace's palm. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the room seemed to breathe. The steady beeping of the heart monitor deepened, its rhythm changing just slightly, not louder, but fuller. Ethan blinked, unsure if his exhaustion was painting illusions. "What are you doing?" he whispered. The girl didn't look at him. Her lips moved soundlessly, as if whispering to someone unseen. Her brow furrowed, and for a moment, she looked older, not in age, but in the weight she carried. Grace's eyelids fluttered. Just once. Ethan gasped and rushed to her side. "Grace? Sweetheart?" The nurse burst in, alarmed by the sudden spike in readings. "Sir, please step back." But Ethan couldn't. He was gripping his daughter's hand now, tears spilling freely. "She moved. I swear she moved." The girl stepped away quietly, her face pale, her breathing uneven. "It's not over yet," she murmured. "Don't speak too loudly. She's still finding her way." The nurse checked the monitor, frowning. "Vitals look stronger. That's strange. We didn't change her medication." When Ethan turned back, the girl was gone again. No door opened. No sound. Only the faint warmth left on Grace's hand where hers had rested. That night, Ethan didn't leave her side. He prayed harder, his mind spinning. Was it real? Or grief playing tricks? But deep down, something had shifted, a pulse of faith where despair had lived for too long. Morning came with sunlight sneaking through the blinds. Grace's color looked different. Warmer. Her fingers twitched again, faint but deliberate. The doctor called it neurological reflex. Ethan called it hope reborn. Later that afternoon, Ethan went outside again, scanning every corner of the hospital grounds. He found her near the same chapel steps, this time humming softly, eyes closed. "You disappeared," he said. She smiled faintly. "You weren't ready for the rest." Ethan crouched beside her, heart pounding. "Tell me what's happening to her. Please." The girl opened her eyes, gray, deep, almost otherworldly. "You love her deeply. But love can't always reach across the distance alone. Sometimes, someone has to walk with her part of the way." Ethan's breath hitched. "Who are you?" She hesitated, then looked toward the chapel window. "Someone who's walked that road before." Before he could ask more, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny silver pendant, a small angel with broken wings. "Put this under her pillow tonight," she said softly. "But remember, faith only works if your heart is still open." She pressed it into his hand, stood, and walked away without another word. Ethan stared after her, questions spinning like storm clouds. That night, he did as she said. He placed the pendant under Grace's pillow, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Come back to me, baby girl." Then, as he drifted into uneasy sleep beside her bed, he heard something, a whisper, faint and childlike. "Daddy!" His eyes snapped open. Grace's lips had moved. He shot upright, trembling. "Grace? Sweetheart? Say it again." But her lips stilled. The monitor's rhythm held steady, as if teasing him. He leaned close, tears blurring his vision. "Was that you?" he whispered. The room felt different now. Not empty. Alive. He clutched her hand, whispering, "I don't care how, just come back." Behind him, unseen, the pendant glowed faintly beneath the pillow, a soft silver light pulsing once, twice, then fading into stillness. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. Ethan didn't sleep the rest of that night. Every time his eyes closed, he replayed that whisper, soft, trembling, unmistakable. "Daddy!" It wasn't a hallucination. He knew the sound of his daughter's voice the way a heartbeat knows its rhythm. By morning, doctors were astonished. Grace's neural activity had risen for the first time in months. Her EEG, once flat and quiet, now danced faintly like distant echoes of life. "She might be responding to something," one nurse said. "It's subtle, but it's there." Ethan wanted to tell them about the girl, the pendant, the glow, but something stopped him. It sounded too fragile, too sacred to expose to disbelief. Instead, he smiled through tears. "Just keep believing," he whispered. Days passed. Each morning, Grace's fingers twitched, her breathing deepened, her heart rate steadied. It was like she was swimming toward the surface after being lost underwater too long. But one thing gnawed at him, the girl hadn't returned. Not once. Until the 7th night. The hospital halls were silent, bathed in dim yellow light. Ethan sat by the window, eyes heavy, when he heard it again, the faint hum of that same melody the girl had sung by the chapel. He followed the sound down the corridor. There she was, sitting cross-legged on the floor outside the pediatric wing, eyes closed, humming softly. The same torn hoodie. The same calm presence. He approached slowly. "You came back." She opened her eyes, smiled. "You believed. That's why." Ethan knelt beside her. "Tell me who you really are. Please." She tilted her head. "Does it matter who helps, as long as she wakes up?" He hesitated, then nodded. "If it's real, then no. It doesn't." Her eyes softened. "Good. Then let's bring her closer." She stood, and for the first time, Ethan noticed she wasn't shivering despite the hospital's cold night air. They returned to Grace's room together. The girl moved to the bedside, whispered something under her breath, words in a language Ethan didn't recognize. Grace's body trembled. Her fingers gripped the blanket. The heart monitor beeped faster. "Is she in pain?" Ethan asked, panic rising. The girl shook her head. "She's fighting. Don't stop her." Grace's eyelids flickered again. This time, they stayed open just long enough for Ethan to see her eyes, hazy, unfocused, but alive. He broke down, sobbing. "That's my girl, that's my little girl." The girl stepped back, hands trembling. A faint streak of blood ran from her nose. She wiped it quickly. "You're hurting," Ethan said. "What's happening to you?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "It takes a toll, guiding someone back. But she's close now. So close." He grabbed her shoulder gently. "Why are you doing this for us?" Her eyes met his, shimmering with unshed tears. "Because someone once prayed for me too. But no one came." Ethan froze. "You mean?" She smiled faintly, as if remembering something both painful and beautiful. "Not all miracles are meant for the living, Mr. Hale." He didn't understand, not fully, but his heart did. Somehow, this girl's pain was woven into his daughter's salvation. Before she left that night, she whispered, "Tomorrow, she'll dream of me. When she does, tell her not to be afraid." Then she slipped out into the hallway, vanishing once again before he could ask her name. Ethan sat there until morning, clutching Grace's hand. And for the first time, she squeezed back. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight." The morning sunlight crept softly across Grace's face. Her eyelids twitched, her fingers flexed again, stronger this time. Ethan leaned forward, hope and fear battling inside him. "Grace," he whispered, voice shaking, "can you hear me, sweetheart?" Her lips moved, barely forming the word. "Dad!" He gasped, pressing his forehead against her hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Nurses rushed in as alarms chirped, this time from activity, life stirring where silence had ruled for months. "She's responding." "Increase observation," one called out. Grace's eyes fluttered open for a few precious seconds. Her pupils darted faintly toward the window light before closing again. Her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. "She's stabilizing," the doctor said, half in awe. "Whatever triggered this, it's remarkable." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too busy crying, relief breaking through months of sorrow. That night, he sat beside her as machines hummed softly. "You're coming back to me," he whispered. "I knew you would." The pendant under her pillow glimmered again, faint but steady. Then, as if drawn by that glow, the girl appeared in the doorway. Her face was paler than before, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "You did it," Ethan breathed. She opened her eyes. The girl nodded weakly. "She's almost home. But she's scared. She doesn't recognize the path." Ethan frowned. "Path?" "She's between light and silence," the girl said softly. "That place is cold, lonely. Someone needs to call her name, not from fear, but from love." He took a deep breath. "How do I do that?" The girl's eyes shimmered. "Tell her who she is. Remind her why she should wake up." He nodded and turned back to Grace, his voice trembling but firm. "Grace, it's Dad. You love the morning light, remember? You used to open the curtains before school and say, Good morning, world. You have to say it again, baby. Say it for me. Her hand twitched. Her pulse quickened. The girl smiled faintly. She hears you. Ethan turned back, but she was swaying, clutching the wall. Hey, are you okay? I'm fine, she whispered, though her breath came shallow. Every time she breathes again, I fade a little. That's how it works. He caught her as her knees buckled. No, you're not fine. You need a doctor. She shook her head fiercely. No hospital can help me. Just promise, when she wakes up, don't let her forget me. Tears blurred his vision. You talk like you won't be here tomorrow. The girl smiled through her pain. Tomorrow isn't for me, Mr. Hale. It's for her. Ethan wanted to argue, to fight whatever unseen rule governed her fading strength, but before he could, she placed a trembling hand over his heart. Tell her she's loved enough to come back, she whispered. That's all she needs. She pulled away, walking toward the window. Moonlight bathed her silhouette, thin, ghostly, yet peaceful. Ethan stood frozen as she looked back one last time. She's not the only one being saved, she said softly. Then she was gone. The next morning, Grace opened her eyes fully, confused, weak, but awake. Her first word, hoarse and fragile, was, Daddy. He broke down, laughing through tears. Yes, baby, I'm here. I'm right here. Grace blinked, dazed. There was a girl, she took my hand, said she'd bring me back to the light. Ethan's heart stopped. What girl? Grace smiled faintly, eyes filled with sleepy wonder. She said her name was Ava. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. Ethan's breath caught when he heard that name. Ava. It echoed through his mind like a forgotten melody, familiar yet impossible. Grace, how do you know that name? Grace's eyelids fluttered. She told me. When everything was dark, she held my hand. She said, follow the sound of your father's love. It'll lead you home. Her voice cracked, and Ethan brushed a tear from her cheek. You're safe now, baby. You're home. But his heart was racing. Ava. The name felt carved into his bones. He tried to remember where he'd heard it before, but grief fogged his thoughts. As days passed, Grace grew stronger. Doctors called her recovery a medical miracle. Ethan just called it answered prayer. But every time Grace smiled, every time she whispered thank you to the heavens, Ethan thought of the girl in the rain, the calm eyes, the broken pendant, the way she'd said miracles like places they can't be bought. And the more he thought about it, the more impossible it all seemed. No one else had seen her. The security cameras near the chapel showed nothing. The hospital staff had no record of her visiting. It was like she had existed only between faith and light. Still, Grace kept talking about her. She wasn't scared, she said one afternoon, sunlight pooling across her blanket. She said she'd walked the same road once. That it was cold, but beautiful. Ethan frowned. Grace, did she say anything else? She said she used to live here, Grace whispered. In this hospital. The word struck him like a cold wave. What do you mean? She said her dad prayed for her too. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He turned away, searching for air. That night, after Grace fell asleep, he walked through the quiet halls until he found himself back in the hospital's archives room. The scent of paper, dust, and silence filled the air. He asked the night clerk, "Can you look up patients named Ava? Maybe a girl, a few years ago." The man hesitated, typing slowly. "There are dozens of Avas, sir. Any more details?" Ethan rubbed his temples. Young girl. Around 14. No family. The clerk paused, then scrolled down the list. There was one. Ava Collins. Died 3 years ago. Ethan's world stopped. How? Car accident. Brought in from the highway. They tried to save her for hours, but she never woke up. Her father visited every day until the clerk trailed off. Ethan swallowed hard. Until what? The man sighed. Until he passed away, too. Heart failure. Same week. Ethan stood there, frozen. His knees nearly buckled. Ava. The pendant. The hospital steps. The words, "Not all miracles are meant for the living." He stumbled out of the room, barely breathing. The corridor lights blurred. He leaned against the wall, tears spilling down. In the stillness, a faint whisper brushed his ear. "Thank you for letting me keep my promise." He looked up. The hallway was empty, yet the air shimmered, warm, golden, almost alive. He whispered back, "You saved her." And for the first time in years, he felt something in his chest loosen. A peace that didn't ask questions, that simply was. The next morning, when Grace woke, she smiled at him and said, "I saw her again. She said she's finally going home." Ethan smiled through tears. "She already did, sweetheart. Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply." For the next few weeks, life inside that hospital room felt like sunrise after a long storm. Grace could sit up now, her cheeks full of color again, her laughter soft but real. Nurses stopped by just to hear her talk, even the cold corridors seemed warmer when she smiled. But Ethan couldn't forget. Every quiet moment, every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ava, her fragile frame, her trembling smile, her final words echoing like a hymn, "She's not the only one being saved." He needed to understand. One evening, when Grace was asleep, he visited the chapel again. Only a few candles burned. The stained glass shimmered faintly under the city's distant glow. Ethan knelt by the same step where he had first met her. The rain outside whispered against the glass. "Ava," he said softly, his voice barely above a breath. "If you're still listening, thank you. But why me? Why Grace?" At first, there was only silence, the slow flicker of candlelight, the quiet hum of night. Then a faint breeze brushed past him, though no doors had opened. The candles danced wildly, one going out, another flaring brighter. A whisper filled the room, gentle, almost like a memory speaking back. "Because you prayed when you didn't believe anyone could hear." Ethan's throat tightened. "Are you at peace now?" There was no answer, only the feeling of warmth, like a child's hand squeezing his own. He smiled through tears. "Then go home, Ava. You kept your promise." When he returned to Grace's room, she was awake, staring at the ceiling with wide eyes. "Dad," she said softly, "she was here." His heart skipped. "Ava." Grace nodded. She said thank you for remembering her. And that, she's not lonely anymore. Ethan sat beside her, his hand trembling as it brushed her hair. "Then maybe miracles don't end when they start working." Grace smiled faintly. "She said something else too." "What was it?" "She said the world's full of people like her. Lost. Forgotten. Waiting for someone to call their name." Ethan looked down, his heart heavy with a strange, bittersweet peace. "Then maybe that's what we're meant to do, Grace, call them back." The days turned to weeks, and soon the hospital discharged Grace. The day they left, the nurses gathered, clapping softly as Ethan pushed her wheelchair through the halls. Everyone called it a miracle. But Ethan knew better. It wasn't science alone. It wasn't luck. It was love, stitched between two souls, one living, one not, finding their way back through faith. Before stepping outside, he stopped by the chapel one last time. He lit 2 candles. One for Grace, and one for the girl who never stopped believing in light. As he stood there, Grace's small hand slipped into his. "Dad," she whispered, "look." By the doorway, bathed in sunlight, stood a girl, clean-faced, radiant, smiling. No torn clothes. No pain. Just peace. She looked at Grace, then at Ethan, and mouthed 2 words before fading into the light, "Thank you." Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the last ache of grief dissolve. He whispered, "Rest easy, Ava. You made me believe again." If you believe love still wins, comment in. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. Months passed, and spring painted the world new again. Grace was walking now, slowly at first, then with more confidence each day. The hospital visits had stopped, the machines were gone, and laughter filled the house like sunlight after too many storms. Ethan would still catch himself pausing sometimes, just to watch her breathe, to hear her hum to herself as she drew near the window. It was the same hum Ava used to sing, the same tune that had led him down the hallway that night. "Dad!" Grace called one morning, holding up a sketchbook. "Look!" On the page was a pencil drawing of a girl, young, kind-faced, her hair falling over her shoulder, eyes bright and calm. "It's her," Grace said softly. "Ava." Ethan smiled, his eyes misting. "You remember her clearly?" Grace nodded. "She said she'll always be around when I need courage." He rested his hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll keep her memory alive. Maybe that's how miracles last." That weekend, Ethan and Grace visited the hospital for the first time since her recovery. They brought flowers, 2 bouquets. One for the pediatric ward, one for the chapel. As they walked the familiar halls, nurses greeted Grace like family. Some cried seeing her alive and laughing. When they reached the chapel, Grace placed her bouquet beneath the stained glass window, right where she remembered first seeing Ava's shadow. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan lit another candle beside it. For every parent still praying. For every soul still trying to find their way back. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain. The air felt charged, alive. On the ride home, Grace turned to him. "Dad, can I tell her story someday?" He smiled. "You should. The world needs it." Grace's gaze softened. "Not everyone will believe it." "That's okay," he said. "Miracles aren't meant to be proven. Just shared." She looked out the window as sunlight broke through the clouds. "Then I'll share it for her. For Ava." Ethan nodded, tears catching in his voice. "That's my brave girl." That night, after Grace fell asleep, he sat by her bedside again, this time, not in despair but gratitude. He whispered into the still air, "You were right, Ava. She wasn't the only one saved." The pendant still rested under Grace's pillow. It hadn't glowed since that night. But as the moonlight spilled across the room, a soft shimmer pulsed once more, gentle, peaceful, like a heart saying goodbye. Ethan smiled, whispering, "Good night, angel." And somewhere, in a place between dreams and dawn, a young girl's laughter echoed softly, free at last. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Summer came, warm and golden. Grace was fully healed, her laughter spilling through every room like music. She started volunteering at the same hospital that once held her between life and silence. Every week, she'd visit the pediatric ward, reading stories to children too weak to leave their beds. One afternoon, Ethan arrived to pick her up early. He found her in the playroom, sitting beside a little boy connected to an 4, her voice soft as she told him a story about a brave girl who walked through the dark to save someone she loved. The boy listened with wide, shining eyes. When she finished, he asked, "Was that story real?" Grace smiled gently. "Yes. I think it was." The boy tilted his head. "What happened to the girl?" "She went home," Grace said, glancing toward the window where the afternoon sun painted the floor in gold. "She's where the light lives now." Ethan watched silently, pride filling his chest. He saw something in Grace, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. The kind that only comes from people who've touched both pain and wonder. On the drive home, Grace turned to him and said, "I think that's what Ava wanted, Dad. Not just to save me, but to remind us that the light never really leaves. It just waits for someone to carry it forward." He smiled, eyes glistening. "And you're carrying it beautifully." They stopped by the park on their way back. Children were laughing, running barefoot through the grass. Grace lifted her face to the sun, eyes closed, breathing in the moment. "Feels like she's here," she whispered. Ethan looked at the sky. Maybe she always was. Later that night, Grace left the pendant by the window, moonlight washing over it. For the first time, she didn't need it close. She just wanted Ava's memory to touch the world beyond her walls. When she woke at dawn, the pendant was gone. In its place, on the window ledge, lay a single white feather, soft, delicate, shimmering faintly like it had caught the last of the starlight. Grace smiled through tears. "Goodbye, Ava," she whispered. Thank you for walking me home. Outside, the morning unfolded slowly, the world alive again, full of color and second chances. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee, one for himself and one he placed by the window. He didn't speak, didn't pray, he simply smiled, knowing some bonds never end, they just change form. And as the first sunbeam crossed the table, it lingered for a heartbeat longer on that empty cup, warm and golden, as though unseen hands were still there, still grateful. Because somewhere, between the living and the light, Ava was still smiling.